September 29, 2025. Three foreign ministers walk into a palace in Warsaw. Sounds like the setup to a diplomatic joke, right? Wrong. This was the day Europe stopped asking nicely. Germany, France, and Poland, three countries that historically couldn't agree on lunch, just issued a joint statement so aggressive, so unified, that Moscow's diplomatic corps probably needed a group therapy session after reading it. They condemned Russia's airspace violations as reckless, hostile acts and unacceptable escalation. They called for immediate peace negotiations, and then, here's the kicker, they announced they're providing more air defense assets to Ukraine and significantly increasing military financing. Russia violated NATO airspace. Europe responded by arming Ukraine even more, and they did it together. Today, you're going to discover why the Weimar Triangle just became Putin's worst geopolitical nightmare. First, let's talk about what the hell the Weimar Triangle even is. Most people have never heard of it, but it's about to become the most important alliance in Europe. The Weimar Triangle was formed in 1991. France, Germany, and Poland decided to create a regional cooperation forum, named after the German city of Weimar, where they first met. For 30-plus years, it was mostly symbolic. Occasional ministerial meetings, nice statements about European integration, the geopolitical equivalent of a book club that never actually reads the books. Then Russia invaded Ukraine, and suddenly this sleepy diplomatic format woke up like someone dumped cold water on it. By February 2025, it expanded into Weimar Plus to include the United Kingdom, Italy, and Spain. Basically Europe's heavy hitters, minus the parts Russia already controls. Here's why this matters. Germany has money and industrial capacity, France has nuclear weapons, and a permanent UN Security Council seat. Poland has a 4.7% GDP defense budget and a burning hatred of Russian imperialism. Together, they represent Europe's three largest militaries, combined GDP exceeding $6 trillion, direct land border with Russia, the ability to actually do something instead of just talking. And the genius move? They're bypassing the Franco-German bilateral format that used to dominate EU decision-making. For decades, Paris and Berlin would negotiate privately, then tell everyone else what they decided. Poland said, not anymore. And France and Germany agreed because they realized something crucial. Poland is right about Russia. They've been right this whole time. So this isn't your grandfather's European Cooperation Forum. These are three nations who finally figured out that Russia doesn't respond to strongly worded letters. They respond to unified action, and September 2025 is when that action got real. Let's talk about what triggered this unified response, because September 2025 was the month Russia decided to test how far they could push NATO. Spoiler, they found out. Russian drones and aircraft violated Polish, Romanian, and Estonian airspace. Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Norway also experienced violations. We're not talking about accidental border crossings. At least 20 Russian drones penetrated Polish airspace during strikes on Ukraine. Estonia reported 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets violating their airspace. Poland's reaction? Prime Minister Donald Tusk declared, "We will make a decision to shoot down flying objects without discussion when they violate our territory. There is no room for debate here. No consultation with NATO, no emergency UN session, just we're shooting you down, deal with it." And they actually did it. Poland shot down Russian drones over their territory, scrambled F-16, activated air defenses. On September 12th, NATO launched Eastern Sentry to bolster NATO's posture along the entire eastern flank. Estonia invoked Article 4, requesting consultations about a threat. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte issued a statement. Russia's actions are escalatory, risk miscalculation, and endanger lives. They must stop. But here's where the Weimar Triangle steps in. September 29th, the three foreign ministers met in Warsaw. They condemned Russian provocations and stressed the necessity to strengthen Europe's defense capabilities. And then they released a joint statement that basically said, Russia, you just made a huge mistake. Think about Russia's strategy here. They wanted to test NATO's red lines, divide European responses, Germany cautious, Poland aggressive, demonstrate their ability to violate airspace with impunity, distract from losses in Ukraine. What actually happened? NATO activated Eastern Central Germany, France, and Poland issued a unified statement. Multiple countries declared they'll shoot down violators. Europe announced more military aid to Ukraine. Russia's provocation didn't divide Europe, it unified them. Oops. So the airspace violations were the trigger. But the Weimar Triangle's response wasn't just words. They announced concrete actions that are going to hurt Moscow where it counts. Alright, let's break down exactly what Germany, Poland, and France announced they're doing. Because this isn't a vague promise of cooperation. This is a coordinated economic and military assault on Russia's war machine. France, Germany, and Poland will continue to provide air defense assets to Ukraine to combat Russia's illegal actions. Not considering, not discussing. Will continue. This means more Patriots, more Iris-T systems, more ammunition, more training. Poland alone has been one of Ukraine's biggest military supporters. Weimar partners agree that financing for both short and long-term military support must be significantly increased. Translation: open the checkbooks. Poland's already spending 4.7% of GDP on defense. Germany pledged to hit 3% if economic conditions allow. France is ramping up production. They're pushing for swift adoption of the EU's 19th sanctions package, which for the first time will sanction companies in third countries financially supporting Russia's war, like oil refineries processing Russian oil. This is huge. Russia's been circumventing sanctions by routing oil through India, China, Turkey. The 19th package proposes an embargo on Russian liquefied natural gas. Complete. LNG ban. We will intensify efforts to dismantle the shadow fleet that undermines sanctions, finances Moscow's war, and poses grave environmental and maritime safety risks, especially in the Baltic Sea. Russia's been using ancient, barely seaworthy tankers to export sanctioned oil. Poland, Germany, and France announced they'll intensify efforts to counter Russia's shadow fleet in the Baltic Sea. This means tracking, boarding, impounding these vessels, destroying Russia's oil export capability. They're supporting further leveraging the immobilized Russian sovereign assets to support Ukraine through the Reparations Loan Initiative. Europe has frozen approximately $300 billion in Russian central bank assets. They're now using the interest from those assets to fund Ukraine's military. And they're discussing going further, actually seizing the principal to pay for reconstruction. Notice the pattern. Every action hits Russia's ability to fund the war. Air defense makes Russian strikes expensive and ineffective. Sanctions cut off revenue. Shadow fleet. Crackdown stops oil exports. Frozen assets directly fund Ukraine. This isn't a military confrontation. This is economic strangulation. And Russia can't counter it because their economy is already struggling. Now, here's where it gets spicy. Despite historic tensions between Poland and Ukraine over grain exports and ongoing Franco-German drama surrounding the Future Combat Air System project, the joint declaration lent strong support to deeper European integration. These three countries have legitimate disagreements. Poland and Ukraine fight over agricultural imports. France and Germany can't agree on fighter jet development. But in Russia, total unity. So those are the immediate actions. Economic warfare combined with military support for Ukraine. But the Weimar Triangle isn't just reacting to September's violations. They're building something bigger. So let's bring this home. September 29th, 2025. Germany, Poland, and France stood together in Warsaw and declared, "Enough." They condemned Russia's airspace violations as reckless, hostile acts. They pledged to provide more air defense to Ukraine. They committed to increasing military financing significantly. They're pushing the 19th sanctions package, dismantling the shadow fleet, weaponizing frozen assets, building continental air defense, fast-tracking Ukraine's EU membership. Russia wanted to divide Europe. They violated multiple countries' airspace thinking Germany would urge caution while Poland demanded action. Instead, Germany backed Poland's aggressive stance. France joined them. And the three countries issued one of the most unified, forceful statements in European diplomatic history. European countries can't agree on anything. They'll debate while Russia acts. Russia's provocations unified Europe faster than any diplomat could. The Weimar Triangle went from symbolic forum to operational alliance in months, and at the center of it all? Poland. The country everyone underestimated, the one that remembers Soviet occupation and refuses to let history repeat. Poland's not asking for permission anymore. They're leading, and France and Germany are following because they've realized Poland's been right about Russia all along. Will this unity last? That's the question. Germany's bureaucracy, France's domestic politics, Poland's debt, Trump's potential return, there are legitimate challenges. But Russia's aggression, provocations, and hybrid warfare will not weaken our resolve. On the contrary, they reinforce our determination to act together. Every time Russia escalates, European unity strengthens. That's the opposite of what Moscow wanted. September 2025 wasn't just about airspace violations, it was about Europe remembering who they are. Not individual nations squabbling over policy details, but a continent that, when pushed, pushes back. Together. If this deep dive into European unity revealed angles you hadn't considered, smash that subscribe button. We're covering the geopolitical shifts that determine Europe's future and Russia's fate. Drop a comment. Do you think the Weimar Triangle unity will last? Or will internal divisions eventually fracture the alliance? And here's a spicy one for debate. Should Germany be more aggressive like Poland, or is their caution strategically smart? Thanks for watching. Next time, we're breaking down what happens if Russia actually attacks a NATO member. Spoiler, it doesn't end well for Moscow. See you then.